Okay, this is the last bit of Unit 7, Week 6, Lecture 12, Part 2. Now that we have a really good understanding of water and how it behaves as a solvent and how we clean up water, now's a good time to just spend a few minutes talking about the difference between tap water and bottled water, because not only do you have to be mindful, obviously that the water you drink is clean, but you need to be able to make good consumer decisions as to whether or not it's worth it to purchase bottled water or if tap water will do. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about where the water in bottled water comes from. As it turns out, the sources, this is just a diagram from your textbook going through the steps in the life of the creation of bottled water from the source to the market. And the sources are either protected underground springs and wells, and protected meaning that they're carefully regulated to make sure that people aren't dumping chemicals nearby. It's not near a chemical facility or something like that. Or municipal supplies. Okay, so all bottled water is not spring water. Some of it is just from somebody else's tap other than your own. But the thing is, that's where the bottled water starts, and this is basically the end of where your water supply that's coming out of your tap may start or end up. It's where the bottled water starts. And so the next step for bottled water is this multi-barrier practices for safety to make sure that the water is free of contaminants. They protect the source, make sure that the springs and the municipal providing the water stays safe from contaminants. They continually monitor the source of their water. They subject the water to further purification more than would be just from a regular tap source. For example, they may do reverse osmosis to remove some of the ions that are still present in water. They may subject it to ultraviolet light, which would kill bacteria. They may distill it, which would remove the salts. They may subject it to micron filtration. Those are filters on the scale of microns or micrometers, which would filter out bits of bacteria. And finally, they may be subjected to ozonation, which again would kill bacteria. So it's above and beyond what would be normally done for tap water. Then federal regulations. There's federal regulations that regulate the bottling of water. And for example, the plants, how they're put together, the plants where they process this water, the facilities to make sure they stay clean, process controls to make sure everything's done within guidelines, quality standards, and labeling standards. There's also state regulations. They conduct inspections of bottled water sources and facilities. So you've got two more levels of protection above and beyond a regular municipal source. And then finally, there's self-imposed industry regulations that sets its own set of standards, which are even stricter than the FDA or the EPA. And those members are subject to annual unannounced plant inspection by nationally recognized third-party organization. So this is like a professional organization that kind of self-regulates to make sure if you're going to call yourself, bottled water, you live by these standards. All right, so so obviously, at every step along the way is added expense. So as it turns out, bottled water, depending on the brand, is 250 to 100,000 times more expensive than tap water. Okay, well, you can imagine if you're going to go to all the trouble to clean it up more, test it more, put it in bottles. You got to buy the bottles, you got to pay people to put it in the bottles, and then you have to ship the bottles around. Okay, all of that adds expense. And on average, though, a bottled water is about 1,000 times. This is on average 1,000 times more expensive than tap water, which makes most bottled water more expensive than milk. All right, milk. Imagine what you have to do to get milk. You have to have cows, and you have to feed the cows, and you have to milk the cows. Okay, with the water, there's a lot less going on to make water than there is to make milk, but it's a lot more expensive. Okay, so why do people drink bottled water? Well, some prefer the taste, because when some of these practices are done, like for example reverse osmosis or distillation, some bad tasting ions can be removed from, even if the ions aren't unsafe, they may not taste good, and so they can be removed, and then sometimes other ions are put back in to the water. And so in that regard, people feel like it's healthier than tap water. Also, there's the convenience factor of if you are away from, a clean water source, then you may have to rely on bottled water. If there's been some kind of disaster or you're traveling in such a way that you don't have access to clean drinking water. So in some regards, it's necessary to have, but the industry has grown so much over the years just based on, marketing and convincing people that bottled water is better than tap water. But this option, for most people on the planet, is not a viable option for getting clean water. So with all the money we spend on buying and marketing and producing, bottled water for people who already have access to clean water, it kind of makes you think, what are we doing for the poor folks that don't even have a well in their village? Okay, so you might want to think twice before spending money on bottled water.